Hello, this is Barbara Kolm again, and I'm here at FreedomFest, and I have the pleasure to have my old friend Roberto Salinas León here with me. Roberto is a researcher at the Cato Institute. He is the president of the Mexican Business Forum, which is actually most important. He's the Alamos Alliance president. He's the host of the podcast El. And of course, he has been working with many think tanks over the years and has built a large and vast network of Latin American think tanks. Thank you for doing that, by the way. And thank you also, most importantly, because this is dear to me, for being partner and for joining us at the Free Market Roadshow events over the many, many years. Welcome, Roberto.
Well, thank you, Barbara. It's a real pleasure and a privilege to be with you and to continue our conversations and our different intellectual adventures that have joined us together throughout the years.
Well, I didn't mention all the titles you have and all the work that you've been doing with the various think tanks in detail. But what got you into this business of think tanks and intellectual entrepreneurship?
Well, I thought I was going to be a university professor. I did doctoral studies in philosophy and political theory, and I was looking for a job back then in the United States. And my father called me up and said, "Come back to Mexico. There's an opening at a free market think tank that they want you to head the academic division." And I came, I think, at the right time, 1988, when Mexico started talking about liberalizing the economy and about free trade and about stabilizing the currency. And so instead of swimming against the current, all of a sudden I was swimming with the current. And very quickly, that led us to establish a wide network with think tanks in the United States, with institutions abroad, in Europe, with Atlas Network. I met Mark Skousen back then with Mont Pelerin Society. And so in the space of about 2 or 3 years, I thought, wow, this is important work, but most of it is fun.
Yeah, well, it is truly fun. People don't only see the beautiful sides of that.
Right.
It's hard work. It's
very
fundraising.
hard
It's
work.
traveling. It's getting up at catching all the red eyes.
Yes.
Going to bed late. Looking for each and every cent that you need to run the think tank
Right.
or the. It is, but it's rewarding.
It's exhausting work. It's 24/7, but it is very rewarding, and especially the relationships, the camaraderie, and the friendships that have developed, and the fact that you can learn so much from other people that are doing the same thing you are in their respective countries. And that's why I think meetings like Freedom Fest, like what you do at the Free Market Roadshow, are so important to be able to learn from experiences and from other actors that are surely going to show you that perhaps yours is the first word, but certainly not the last word on matters of deregulation or tax policy or of free trade approaches or different arguments for the ideas that we represent.
Well, and after all, I think we all preach in theory the division of labor.
Mhm.
And I think we have now come to a point, thankfully, at the think tank movement, that we also divide labor among each other and use the best practices and learn from each other, as you mentioned.
Well, in a project that I had the opportunity to lead, that was incubated at Atlas Network, to try and foster greater cohesion among Latin American think tanks. One of the great things that I found is that there are problems, let's say in Colombia, that are particular to Colombia, and there are problems, of course, in Venezuela that are particular to Venezuela. But how do I foster the companionship and the collaboration of Colombia, Venezuela, Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Panama, et cetera, et cetera? And that type of cohesion, I think, first of all, is extremely encouraging for those working in their own particular countries, knowing that they have a wide network that they can access. And secondly, that we can all learn from each other on those experiences. So I've had the opportunity to learn from, say, our partners in Bolivia and the great work that they're doing over there. Of course, from Chile and how to combat all the turmoil that they've had in the past few years. Argentina now is, of course, a big hotspot. And that, of course, can be replicated in Europe and Africa, where our mutual friend Magat Wade has also done a very similar effort. and the let's say the beauty of this international community is they're not homogenous. There's a lot of difference of opinion on monetary matters or fiscal matters or public policy matters, but it's in the spirit of constructive and civilized conversation that we try to establish a principal set of ideas or approaches of how to empower our communities and how to make our countries a better place to live.
Well, that is important because, as you mentioned, the diversity of the Latin American countries, we do feel that we have the same issues in Europe. I mean, Europe is not the same. Luckily, it's diverse. We have many different languages. We have many different cultural backgrounds, and this were the things that made Europe great again. And I just had a conversation with Will Ruger, who was talking about the same thing about the United States and the difference of those 50 states.
Right.
So there is no such thing as one size fits all, and
Yeah.
we need to look at the specialities. And
But many people that attack, let's say, the ideas of liberty, or now with this horrendous phrase neoliberalism, and as some of the groups that do not see eye to eye with us, let's say somebody like Joseph Stiglitz thinks it's like a happy box of a homogenous set of ideas that they can attack, and that's really a reducing the movement and the effort to absurdity, right?
Yeah.
That is not the case, and it is not the case when you and I could debate about immigration, or you and I could debate about the pros and cons, let's say, of regional trade regionalization, whether that's protectionist or not. I mean, these are all important issues that affect the livelihood of citizens, but we have to sit down and talk first. And I think the beauty of the liberty movement and the culture of liberty is that you need to learn how to listen, even if you disagree with the other side.
yeah, exactly. And then have disputes about it as well. And that because this is on those disputes we grow and we emerge and we learn from
And we
each other.
learn, and we learn. Yeah.
Well, let's take a step back because I mean, you as a Mexican, there were elections this year, and the right, which has traditionally espoused liberal policies, experimented on appealing defeat to the left. So, what can Mexico expect from the following presidential administration?
Well, speaking of labels, I don't think the current government of Andrés Manuel López Obrador can be adequately categorized as right or left, not even center or even up or down. It's a very curious combination. On the one hand, he espouses the principles of fiscal austerity. On the other hand, he wastes taxpayers' money on either clientelistic support of different groups, or on infrastructure projects and his own pet projects and insignia projects that are never going to produce 1 cent. You know, building a refinery in the port of Dos Bocas in Tabasco, for instance, which was something that he heralded as the great recovery of national sovereignty for Mexico. He's poured in $26 billion and it hasn't produced one single drop of gasoline. It's just much better to send petroleum to Houston, to Deer Park, refine it, and bring it back to Mexico. Oh, that means we're importing and we're not being
Independent.
independent and autosuficientes and self-sufficient. Well, who cares? You're better off, and it's cheaper, and it's better, and it's more cost-effective. And I'm sure that Mexicans, the regular women and men on the street, much rather have reliable and affordable energy inputs that think about national sovereignty, how much that is costing. So it was a crushing defeat, but it's something that forces us to first of all to reboot the way that we present our ideas, and second of all to learn how to work with a new government on those priorities. For instance, free trade has been an absolutely essential component of Mexican growth in the past 30 years, and anybody can say anything of whether you're right or left or center, but nobody will touch free trade in Mexico.
Yeah.
You'll be hard pressed to find somebody who's against free trade in principle or should return to protectionism, because we've seen the enormous benefits. And Mexico today is the number one trading partner of the United States. Barbara, that means that Mexico sells more to the United States than any other country in the world. And it buys more from the United States than any other country in the world. That's unprecedented. That's unheralded. And nobody's going to touch that. Okay, so how do we position ourselves in order to be able to capitalize on those opportunities as we look forward to the next 10, 20, 30 years of trade integration.
Well, that trade is a truly super important point for all of us
Yep.
across the world. And we've seen people in Europe with going more towards protectionism. We see that in the United States. We can only hope that people understand again the benefits of free trade. You wrote an article titled "The Fallacy of Labels" for a literal magazine. So in the article, you mentioned a curious phenomenon. Being right-wing is considered morally questionable, and more so being a right-wing libertarian. So why is morally questionable to be a right-wing Latin American?
Well, la derecha, as it's called in Spanish, is usually, I don't know, eso es de derecha. Oh my goodness, that's conservative, outdated, religious, and only attempting to privilege the let's say the top 1%. Yeah. And so, well, if that's what right wing means, then I'm not a right winger, right? So I don't want to be categorized.
That's why Hayek was not a conservative.
Exactly. And so I think the misuse of labels has become commonplace in public discourse. And I was writing that article, particularly in regard with Javier Milei, who, when the Milei phenomenon not just in Argentina but across the world emerged, many people dismissed him. No, he's an ultra right wing. I even heard not just neoliberal, he's a turbo liberal. Oh goodness gracious! So if neoliberal is already bad, imagine being turbo liberal. He's got to be the son of Satan or the son of Lord Voldemort or something like that. And that means that the debate is rigged and it's boring. It's a semantic debate about what label I'm going to attach to you. What are the principles? What does Javier Milei think about free trade, for instance? What does he think about stabilizing the unit of account? Is what he says the right choice for Argentina or the wrong choice? Let's talk about it, but not use the labels to simply discredit him. Oh, he's the Trump of Las Pampas. And with that, they think that the argument is over, and it's not. And that's my question with the laziness of many public intellectuals that rely on these labels to simply close the conversation.
So what can we do to unlabel or delabel that?
Stop using them. We're in favor of the principles of liberty. What does that mean? It can mean a great variety of things. But among them is sound money, for instance. And why is that important? If that's neoliberal or paleoliberal or post-liberal or whatever, I don't care. No, but I'm in favor of sound money. I'm in favor of what Richard Epstein calls simple rules for a complex world. I'm in favor of a strong government, but a small government, and one that prioritizes security, peace, and contract enforcement. I'm in favor of trade, not just inside but outside, free and voluntary trade,
and not managed trade.
Not managed trade, but as Manuel Ayau used to say, when trade is free and voluntary, one party benefits only if the other party
benefits too.
So a necessary condition for you to benefit is that the other party benefits as well. And that's, I think, a very important point. How to defend these things? There are always going to be protectionist forces that want to protect agriculture, they want to protect the steel industry, semiconductor industry, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we have to go back and repeat the same old principles of comparative advantage and of division of labor and of why greater trade makes us all better off.
Well, you just mentioned Manuel Ayau with his book, Why Economics is Not a Zero-Sum Game.
Right.
And this is one of the books that we could recommend to the next generation.
Yes, young, absolutely.
Listeners, because it's very simple written, it's nicely written. You can immediately understand that you can only create added value with exchange and mutual exchange. What other books would you recommend to read to the next to people who are interested to learn more about freedom and liberty? They're great ideas.
Well, I think, and especially a lot of the politicians, certainly in the case of Mexico, I think, first of all, you have to look into your own traditions. So there's a tremendous classical liberal tradition in Mexico, except we don't talk about them. We usually talk about people like Hayek or Ludwig von Mises or Milton Friedman. But what about José María Luis Mora? And what about Lucas Alemán? What about the Flores Magón brothers? Or what about many of the other contributions, Daniel Cosío Villegas or currently Enrique Krause. And we have to look into those roots. And if we don't like something that they say, let's criticize it and let's talk about it. That's one thing. The other thing is I think we should do a great effort to try and recover the lore and learning of Frederick Bastiat. Because Bastiat had the magic, like Henry Hazlitt and some others after him, to be able to explain things in very simple terms, which does not mean that it's not like the law for dummies or trade for dummies. No, we're not dummies. We're common sense people. But let's get away from the highbrow philosophical or economic language, and let's translate it into apples and oranges. A lot of my work in media has tried to concentrate on that. Perhaps not successfully, but
I think you have been very successful on that.
but I think it's very important to develop the narratives, and sometimes those narratives are competing with promises on the other side that promise instant redemption. Right, the socialist utopia. Let's say we're all going to be equal, or we're all going to be we're going to promise free healthcare, free education, and a dignified life, and free ping pong rackets, and free everything. Well, it's not. First of all, it's not free, and second of all, the person that is saying that is actually incurring what I would call the fallacy of the vanity of instant redemption. So you can claim that you can erase history, begin tomorrow, erase all of history, begin tomorrow, and offer redemption to every citizen on the spot. And that is exactly what Hayek called the fatal conceit, because that is a massive exercise in social engineering. It's no wonder that a lot of these autocrats and authoritarians treat their citizens like animals. And even López Obrador in Mexico has said, los pobres son animalitos. The poor people, the middle class people, they're like little animals that we need to take care of. I think that's so insulting, and it goes against the dignity of the human being to try and better himself or herself. It's no wonder that many of the Petro in Colombia is against aspirational mentalities. So aspirational mentalities lead to savage capitalism. In other words, I want to live a better life. And that's bad.
This is what you deserve.
This is what you deserve, exactly.
And especially if you achieve it yourself and you don't steal it from anybody else.
Right.
I mean, this is the point that governments don't want that. That we are better off, obviously, because then they cannot control people.
Well, yeah, and certainly that happens at the bureaucratic level, but it also happens with this rise of new autocrats and new authoritarians. And Moises Naim, for instance, he has a wonderful concept called post-truth. It doesn't matter what you say. It can be alternative facts. It can be an alternative reality. It's just the soundbite. And how effective can I be in the message? And if they believe me, it doesn't matter if it corresponds to reality or not. So it's about it's about controlling public discourse and controlling the narrative, and that is very dangerous because that's two steps away from full-blown authoritarianism.
Well, and then this is what we see in many countries across the world now. So what can we do as people who believe in free markets, who believe in individual and entrepreneurial freedom, that we don't fall into this trap? I mean, this year we have the 80th anniversary of Hayek's Road to Serfdom, where he actually warned us against this totalitarianism, against this central planning. And what can we, apart from the work that we as think tankers do, what kind of idea could we give people that they wake up and say, hey guys, I want to achieve things for myself, I want to be better off? I know there is no universal recipe.
No, there's no magic wand, and there's no universal recipe. I myself have tried to work on this issue, on this challenge, in three different ways. First of all, I think that when we propose public policy, we need to use a lot of what J.K. Rowling called failure and imagination. Bring a great deal of imagination and how to, in almost a game theory mentality of how to propose, let's say, energy reform. If you propose it a la IMF, top down, that's not going to work. That's the tyranny of the experts that William Easterly has well deservedly denounced. And so I think when we approach tax policy, when we approach energy policy, fiscal policy, Let me give you one example. It's a little bit academic, but there's one individual, Ignacio Briones in Chile, who's worked on, if you were behind Rawls's veil of ignorance, and you could choose what generation you belong to, what kind of fiscal rule. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be the generation in the future or the generation in the past, but surely if I'm going to be the one in the future and the one in the past has spent much more than what they have, then I in the future are going to have to pay for the goodies of the past. So I want a fiscal rule that is actually prudent. That's the type of thinking that I think, on the one hand, for public policy proposals. Our narratives, sharpen our narratives, storytelling. It's very important to tell the story of entrepreneurship. I mentioned our partners in Bolivia because they've gone to Los Altos in La Paz, which is this market that is at 4,000 meters, extremely high, and it's a spontaneous order. Hayek would have been absolutely amazed to see what happens in Los Altos, and it happens in an absolutely uncoordinated manner, decentralized manner. But that's the magic of the market. And if somebody needs something in Bolivia, they go to Los Altos. So that's what markets are. Milei, I think, has been very powerful in the way that he's communicated. And the last, Barbara, is to repeat. We have to repeat the benefits of free trade, the benefits of sound currency, the benefits of simple rules for the complex world. And are we going to win the day? No, you're not. You have to assume that there's always going to be somebody that has that vanity of instant redemption and the fatal conceit. And you have to denounce. It's almost a perpetually defensive strategy.
But we will never give up.
That's true.
Well,
that's true.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for taking the time. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation and hope to see you at the Free Market Roadshow very soon again. Thank you.
Certainly my hope. Thank you, Barbara.
Thanks.